Hey there everyone, and welcome to some RPG horror story cringe with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have a tale about a dungeon master that seems like he wants his game to become the next Critical Role, a story about a player that secretly wants to be the BBEG, and more. But first, as is tradition, here's a kitty to help boost our wholesome levels before we bring them right back down. There we go. And with that, I think we are ready to delve right into the cringe. Podcast DM drove out his entire party because he refused to discuss issues. By Reddit user, Old Gossip Guy. Hey, so this is my first time posting here, and also this is extremely recent, as it's only been a week. For the purposes of swiftness, all it really boils down to are players and DM. So 6 months ago, I entered a post looking for players in an actual play podcast. While I've done podcasting before, and like producing stuff, at the end of the day, I just wanted to play in a campaign, and reasoned that treating it like a show would at least get people to keep a consistent schedule. I later found out that most of the players also shared the same mindset. We start playing, and while it was fun to start, there were ignored signs that festered over time. 1. He forced backstory changes large and small on each of the players for content reasons. One player in particular was even directly informed, "You are the comedy relief. It's your job to make jokes." Which is, while not diabolical, still weird. Interesting ideas got boiled down by the DM to one note. "LOL, you chose Bard, so you're a sex maniac. Isn't that wacky?" My cleric got completely overridden as my initial idea of man is prophet to an ancient forgotten god that he can't comprehend or understand, so is just fearfully guessing. That got changed to, "Nah, you worship Davy Jones now. He's right there and directly talks to you." So yeah, fairly major change there. 2. Everything was sexual with him. His world building, his NPCs, his quote-unquote jokes. If it wasn't something to do with that, he didn't seem to think it was funny. And look, yeah, that humor is totally fine, in moderation. But when it's the same note getting hammered down time and time again, it gets exhausting. Having to refer to a nearby town by the name he gave it, Fort Itch Me Balls, just felt embarrassing. Especially knowing that this was recorded. 3. It was hard to see at the beginning, but he had a consistent pattern of putting children and NPCs in danger, suffering, dying, throughout the whole campaign. None of us were comfortable with this, but tried to shrug it off in the hope that it was just a one-off thing. This was the most egregious, and what ultimately lit the fire that burned the whole thing down. So we're muddling through this thing, because even if we don't like the story, we enjoy playing with each other as players. Our senses of humor and group dynamics were strong, and it was fun in that respect. And in our view, we did our best to make what had become very serious and depressing adventures into something akin to entertaining for listeners. The DM, however, constantly belittles us and says that we haven't even gotten to the story yet, which he never elaborated on what he wanted us to do, and directly made our characters suffer if we didn't make interesting choices. An example, my character was bit by a werewolf and chose to get his arm amputated instead of constantly putting his friends in danger of him turning. This was apparently the wrong choice, and my character spent the last 10 out of 22 sessions being humiliated, mocked, and tortured by his deity for this reason. Anytime we would try to bring up concerns, he would say, "Oh yeah, don't worry, there's a story reason for that." And nothing would ever actually get addressed. One week, a majority of the players couldn't record, so he ran a Valentine's Day themed one-shot with a bunch of guests. It was essentially the dating game. 4 suitors pursued 3 people, and whoever didn't get chosen got fed to a dragon. It was surprisingly fun and a light idea for a one-shot, right? Think again. He made everything a sex joke, got audibly bored when characters talked to each other, and lost his mind when the players decided to have fun and planned not to choose anyone because that's just how the roleplay was going. All the players sounded like they were having fun, but because he said that they were metagaming, he ground everything to a halt and made them all do a boring and unfair fight. The dude basically cut off the one-shot's nose to spite its face. Hearing this behavior from the outside really revealed just how possessive and control freakish he actually was. After this, one of those guests ended up becoming part of the main campaign, which was great, as they were a great player and did the best with what they could. But they were chastised after sessions for not being funny enough. Said sessions involved an NPC being murdered, my character being tortured again, and a solemn funeral. So, Comedy City really. And no one felt in control anymore. We weren't playing anymore. It just felt like we were clocking in and doing a shift. Concerns were brought to the DM again, individually, and again, they were brushed off. The final session. An 8-year-old girl that was forced into the scene, we weren't given a chance to see if we noticed that she stowed away with us, is bitten by a vampire and will absolutely die unless we do a soul transference, some crap he made up on the spot. In character, we discussed what to do, and I was honestly proud of how we conducted ourselves. We ended up convincing an NPC that was mourning his own daughter's loss to do the transfer. We informed the person doing the transfer, and he had no objections. We informed mine and the new player's deity, who was the child's father by the way, and he had no objections. We're all in the moment and giving the NPC some dignity in this. And then, both of them just die. Just like that. The DM then says, "The NPC didn't have the right kind of soul, so it doesn't work." He then got mad at us because the girl was never supposed to die. This obviously led to a 30-minute argument about how he had multiple opportunities to let us know what could and couldn't work. And also, he had an ample opportunity to not put a girl in danger at all. We all left the session angry and drained, and agreed to step away from our feelings for a day before we did anything else. In that time, he sent us all an email saying that he was sorry for how things went, and wanting us to come to him with our concerns. So that's what I did. I sent him back a Google Doc, where I just responded to each of his points as they came up in his email. He responded back with another email that just said what he always said, which were just brushing off platitudes. I then messaged everyone, players and the DM, asking if we could all be in a group call later in the week to discuss things and try to start the process of reconciling issues. All the players immediately agreed, as they all had their own concerns that weren't being addressed, but the DM went radio silent. A day later, I and 2 others get passive-aggressive emails from him informing us that we were being let go. After learning this, the remaining players, one of whom was informed that he could stay because he was the most non-problematic, also left in solidarity. Long story short, all of us players are still friends and are going to keep playing together, but without making quote-unquote content. And the DM is, as far as I know, scrambling to replace his entire table and lying about what is actually going on to the pod's listeners. Yeah, it sounds like this DM was more concerned about making a show than having a fun game. It's one thing to have a fun game where everyone enjoys playing together and then decide to stream it so others can enjoy it, but it's another thing entirely to go into it with the primary goal of becoming Critical Role. So with that, this DM went down the road of being a control freak, and basically forcing a narrative that he thought would gain him followers, if the forced jokes and telling the players to be funnier is any indication. Then, when the DM asks to get some constructive criticism from the players on how to make things better, he can't handle it and just kicks people. Though I would look on the bright side here. At least OP found a good group of players to play with and actually have fun, without the forced end goal of becoming famous streamers. Let's move on. Need an opinion from the horror experts. By Reddit user, Last Word Slinger. I'm one of 2 game leaders in an open play-by-post game, which uses a system of our own creation. So far, we have 5 to 6 players posting regularly. One of the players wanted to play a paladin of an entity in a homebrew world that we use, and this paladin was going to be a whole kill the non-believers zealot type, looking for a secret hidden holy text belonging to this entity. I thought, okay, not sure how this is going to play out. Maybe he'll have some redemptive change of heart arc or something, and I approved the character. Fast forward a bit, and due to player shenanigans, breaking into a local shop, causing wild magic effects throughout the city, and resisting arrest with violence, coupled with many bad rolls on their part, they're all arrested by the city authorities and are given a choice of going on a quest to become legitimate, licensed heroic adventurers or be executed. And everyone accepts the quest, though begrudgingly. Everyone except the paladin. He rants and raves before saying that he'd take the execution, adding an out-of-character comment, basically being salty about working hard on the character for ultimately nothing. The other game leader and I decide that if he wants execution, that's what we'll give him, and adjudicate the paladin being escorted off for his demise. Not long after that, the player contacts us, explaining how he wanted his character to be the BBEG of the game, and that the holy text that he was looking for was supposed to bring about a genocide, then asked us if he could please have a redo with the character. First, neither game leader was ever privy to his plan to become the BBEG. When asked about that, his response was, "I wanted it to be a surprise to everyone, including you two." Second, if his plan was to find the holy text and be the BBEG, why would he not agree to the quest so he could get free and have a chance to find it? When asked this, his response was, "He has an oath to never help the enemy of his nation." Third, why couldn't he just pretend to be helping so he could ultimately achieve his goal and destroy those enemies? Like long-term planning and whatnot. When asked, his response was, "He's a zealot Nazi. Long-term isn't what he does." What? So now, I'm trying to figure out what to do. Let the paladin be executed and tell the guy to make a new character if he wants? Preferably not a secret antagonist? Give his character another chance. Is this a horror story, or one in the making? What do you guys think? Well, I wouldn't say that this is a horror story in the making. It's just a horror story that's already taking place. Just the fact that this player wanted to do a whole thing where he turned out to be the BBEG without any of the game master's input or knowledge just shows that he wants it to be the me show. I mean, look, I have no issue with a player playing one of the bad guys in secret. Hell, I've read some stories where this was pulled off to great effect. But it needs to be done with some tact and finesse, and that involves working in conjunction with the one, or in this case, 2 people that are running the game. Now, as far as letting the player to try to run this character again, I mean, you could give it a shot and see how it pans out, but if I were you, I wouldn't. If I were to keep this player in the game at all, I would state clearly that you don't want him to do the being the BBEG thing, and if he wants to play in the game, that it's best that he just be a normal, not secretly evil character. Though, that would be my solution. What would you guys do if you were in OP's shoes? Let's move on. The Curse of Strahd, or Accepting No RPGs is Better Than Bad Ones, by Reddit user MajesticGur1470. Once upon a time, I was needing a new playgroup, and quickly came to realize why you don't just settle for the first available one, even if it's hard to find a group. This story comes to us from joining a table at a game store, where the DM mentions that he was running Curse of Strahd, but my own homebrew flavor. He also advertised himself, half-jokingly, as a killer DM. I thought nothing of it at the time, but I did feel weird when he mentioned that it might be a good idea to have a backup character ready. Well, it is Curse of Strahd, and honestly, it's not a bad idea to always have a backup character. So there's me, playing a rogue, 3 players who are regulars, and another new guy playing a monk that joins the table. The first thing to throw me for a loop is that apparently, in-game, whenever we aren't there for the regular session, a literal portal will swallow us up and shoot us back to our home dimension. And anytime you come back, the portal spits you back into Barovia, and you have to make a dexterity check, or fall off your butt. Well, that's odd, I thought, but I let it go for now. I could tell the monk was less enthused about this situation though. The party informs us that we're currently on the way back to Strahd's castle, guided by a warhorse named Arson. Which, odd, but sure, let's keep going along to the castle. When we arrive to the castle, it's kind of like a small town. There's a bunch of soldiers and NPCs who populate this castle, manage logistics, etc. Odd, as I kinda thought Strahd was supposed to be a vampire dude who lurked by his lonesome. But hey, DMs are welcome to do as they please. We were asked what we do while we're in the castle, supposedly because we're waiting for Strahd to be finished with whatever task he was working on. So the DM goes around the table asking what we do in the downtime. Some players start getting some equipment. Somebody has to take care of Arson or he'll start a fire because, supposedly, that's how the horse got his name, and I hit up the library. That's when the monk asks if there's any way to train, and the DM gets this grin on his face and mentions that there's training stables with an animated suit of armor that could plausibly be used to practice blows on. Things have just been odd up to this point, but the mood really changes when this gets mentioned. The regular players in the room make explicit mention that their characters are nowhere near the stables when this occurs. I raise all the eyebrows and have my rogue go check out what's going on. A few rounds of simulated combat later, the monk deals some decent damage to the armor. That's when an outroar occurs, and some dwarf guard comes down and starts yelling at the monk, because apparently that's his magic armor, and you damaged it. You owe us money. Well, supposedly, owe them more money. Because, that's right, another party member has already done this before, and for some reason, nobody decided to tell the newbies that. At this point, the monk's player gets up, indicates that they're not enjoying the session, and maybe they should just leave. I'm kind of enjoying how so bad it's good it's getting, so I'm chilling, but I definitely agree that it was worth just leaving at that point. Instead, he doesn't leave, however, and challenges the fighter to trial by combat to avoid having to pay for the gold. What proceeds is the monk engages in several rounds of combat by himself, and the rest of the party is just watching, taking about an hour in session to die because the NPC seems to soak up a lot of damage, but lets himself get disarmed by the monk so that it takes a while for the unarmed punches of the fighter to get through. As the weapons get disarmed, I take advantage of the fact that I'm a tabaxi rogue to dash and grab the equipment, because why not? This is the point that the monk's player, satisfied that the character is dead, I guess, leaves the game. The dungeon master then mentions that the fighter was statted as a level 11 fighter, when the party is level 3, and I'm just left wondering, what's the point of it all? I have a few more good stories involving Mr. Arson the Warhorse, if that story proved entertaining. Let me know in the comments. If I'm to be honest, this isn't that bad of a story. I can understand the player getting a bit miffed at having to pay for the damage to the armor, but to get salty at the other players for not warning him is a bit of an overreaction in my opinion. Plus, for them to warn him about it would have been metagaming, as the other characters were off doing their own things. I will say it's a bit much for the DM to throw an 11th level fighter at the character, but as OP said, that player already said that he was going to be leaving the game, so at that point, I think the DM just said screw it. Though I do have to say that I'm a bit intrigued by the concept of an arson horse, so I'll definitely be keeping a lookout for that story. But that will do it for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.